The CoinGecko podcast is sponsored by eToro. Here's a short blurb about the services that eToro provide.
Meet Chris and Mark. They've both heard of Bitcoin and Ethereum. But while Chris is using eToro to trade top cryptocurrencies, Mark keeps getting cold feet. Chris uses eToro's simple and intuitive platform to build his own crypto portfolio. And Mark is still waiting for a sign. Chris follows and connects with other experienced traders on eToro. Mark is following the advice of Eugene, a friend who prefers to keep his money where he can see it. Chris uses eToro's copy trader to automatically replicate the portfolios of leading traders in real time, while Mark is still searching for answers. Do you feel like a Mark? Join eToro and gain the confidence you need to trade crypto. eToro. Sign up for free.
Welcome to the CoinGecko podcast. For today's episode, we have Joël Hubert, co-founder of NIFTEX. Joël has degrees in econs and finance and going to blockchain from 2012 and NFTs in 2017. He's a self-taught full-stack developer with background in on-chain corporate governance and a passion for digital scarcity. He co-founded MetaLeaf, NIFTEX parent company, in 2019 to provide advanced tooling for the NFT markets. So NIFTEX is a very interesting project. Disclosure, TM and I invested in NIFTEX as angel investors and what NIFTEX does is basically fractionalizing NFTs. So rare NFTs, which could cost, for example, like the Beeper piece, cost millions of dollars. You could fractionalize them and get it for a smaller amount. So yeah, very happy to have you on the CoinGecko podcast, Joël.
Thank you, Bobby. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so I guess to start things, right, Joël? So I tried explaining NIFTEX, but I don't know if I did justice in trying to explain NIFTEX. Do you have a better explanation of NIFTEX than I do, for example?
So I think NIFTEX is first platform of its kind for the fractionalization of NFTs. And the concept is pretty simple, right? If you're looking to, have a little liquidity out of your NFT, or if you're looking to maybe build like a governance, a little DAO around your NFT, or do a creative campaign with it where you want to add the fractions of the NFT, then you can use NIFTEX to do that. So all you kind of have to do is bring your NFT, put it into custody, which is a smart contract, which is transparent, which is auditable. And in return, you get ERC20s, which are nicely compatible with the rest of the blockchain infrastructure that represent pieces of that NFT. So those are the very basics, which are very simple. And then you get into more advanced things like, for example, how do you get that NFT back? Because once you fractionalize that NFT, you kind of want to make sure that there's an efficient way of getting the NFT back. Otherwise, if you can't get it back, it means that the fractions are potentially worthless, right? But one easy thing you could say is, okay, you can get the NFT back. You can get it back from custody if you have 100% of the fractions. But the problem is once those fractions have spread out across the blockchain, across many different wallets, it's very unlikely that you'll ever be able to recover all of them, right? Because people disappear or they lose access to their private keys or many other reasons. So we said, okay, we need to enhance these ERC20s, these tokens that represent pieces of the NFT. We need to enhance it with some additional kind of like governance clauses that can allow you to get that NFT back more efficiently. And so we also introduced, when we first launched last year, there's what we called back then the shotgun clause, but which we call nowadays the buyout clause. But in the end, it's kind of the same. It's inspired from traditional governance. It means that if you own some of the pieces of an NFT, you have the right to make an offer for all the other pieces. And then people have to respond, positively or negatively. And according to that, you can either get the NFT back or you are bought out by everyone that disagrees with that. So we kind of like pioneered a bunch of stuff there, right? So we started building NIFTEX in January 2020. Back then, there was no NFT hype. NFT market was still pretty small. We had no idea if people would care about pieces of NFTs, if fractional ownership was a concept that lived with users. And so the first NIFTEX that launched in May 2020 was very much a proof of concept. But we ended up doing a decent amount of volume in our markets. So back then, we also used Uniswap to bootstrap the markets for these fractions of NFTs. And we ended up doing a decent amount of volume, which kind of validated our thesis. And then, we said, okay, let's take it to the next level. Let's really build this POC out into something that is production ready, that is usable by everyone, that takes in all that feedback, all that experience we gained from the first iteration, and really starts pushing fractionalization as a part of the NFT stack.
Yeah. Were you guys the first to fractionalize NFTs in the market?
Yeah, we were. And well, okay, so nuance. Before we started, as far as I'm aware, and I'm not like a blockchain historian, but as far as I'm aware, there was one other project that kind of combined fungibility and NFTs, and that was wrapped CryptoKitties, so WC0, right? I don't know the exact details of WC0 because it's not super high profile, but I do know that they kind of pooled generation 0 CryptoKitties to make them more accessible and easier to deal with. And that if you own some of that fungible token, the WC0, that you were allowed to claim back an origin kitty if you wanted to, right? So that already existed. And that was kind of like an instance of what OR platform enabled. So with OR platform, theoretically, you could create many more WC0s. But I do think that in terms of like, let's call it industrial fractionalization, we were pretty much the first platform. Yes.
You know, that buyout clause that you guys implemented in NIFTEX sort of reminds me a little bit of like the on-block rule in Singapore, where condominium owners, the governments will say if 70% of the condominium owners like decide to sell their units to a third-party developer, then everyone else, whether they agree or not, will have to kind of accept that and sell. Was that kind of like the inspiration how you got the buyout clause idea?
Yeah, so one of the other names for this is the drag-along clause. And so what you're describing is exactly this drag-along, right? So you've got the majority that wants to do something, and the minority just is not able to kind of counteract this or resist, and it's just kind of like dragged along. So definitely the buyout clause, we didn't invent it. It already existed in traditional governance. I think it's actually quite common, especially for smaller startups, where, you know, one founder wants to go one direction, another founder wants to go another direction, and so you need these mechanics to, you know, solve these conflicts. And that was something we were trying to figure this out, and then we spoke to someone that had a lot of experience with these clauses and said, you know, why don't you look at the shotgun clause, the drag-along clause as a method of dragging people along with you? Because this is the problem of blockchain, is that you don't have a small group of people that you can talk to on Telegram or in person or anywhere else, right? You have all these anonymous addresses. It's really hard to reach these addresses in the first place. So when you decentralize control over an asset like an NFT, you're going to have a really hard time speaking to any of these people, right? So you almost need such clauses that drag along people automatically to be able to achieve this type of governance on chain.
Let's say there is an NFT and then there's been fractionalized, and someone makes a bid on this NFT, and then what happens then? The process, like, do people who host the token, the fractionalized tokens, do they need to kind of decide whether to approve the buyout, yes or no, or do they? And then is there a quorum on how many % of people that has to vote before this buyout takes place, for example?
Right. So the buyout in its first version is pretty simple. So if someone has made an offer, so has started like a buyout round, then there are two options for those that are on the receiving end. So I'm holding some fractions, someone else made an offer. I have two choices. Either I approve this, in which case I don't have to do anything. So this helps us a lot with this dragging along of people on the blockchain, right? You don't need their input. You just kind of assume that they approve because they haven't said anything. And the opposite requires explicit action. So if I want to reject this offer, I have to buy out the person who made the offer at their price, right? So you made an offer for 90% of the fractions at 1 Ether each. That means that if I disagree, and I hold, you know, the remaining 10%, I have to buy you out at the price of 1 Ether for all that 90% that you own, right? And the reason why I have to buy you out at the price you offered is to ensure that people make fair offers. Because if you make a lowball offer, right? If you make an offer of of a few Satoshi per fraction for a total valuation that is very, very low, then I have to be able to punish you to do that, because otherwise you can just spam and spam and spam, right? So what you're doing with the system when you're making a low offer is you're kind of painting a target on your back, because you're saying, oh, I want to buy your fractions at this very cheap price, but because of the mechanism, I'm also giving you the right to buy me out at that price, right? So I am also offering my own fractions implicitly for sale at a very low price. And then if I get bought out because I made such a lowball offer, I get punished. And it's the exact opposite of what I'm trying to achieve, right? So by giving others the right to buy me out at my price, we're making sure that I will make a decent offer to start with. Because if I don't, I run the risk of losing my fractions.
And do I, so I mean, you mentioned I make an offer of 90% of all the fractions at, say, let's say $1 per fraction, for example. But how does the 90% work? Do I need to already own some fraction before I can make a bid? Let's say there's an NFT that's fractionalized, a rare Mystic XC that's fractionalized, and I don't own any fraction, but I want to buy out this entire XC that is fractionalized. So do I need to already have some fraction before I can make a bid, or can I just go in and just put a high ball number? Like, yeah, I'm just curious to hear.
Right. So this comes back to spam prevention. So in the first version of NIFTEX, we allowed you to make an offer, even if you own some very, very small amount of the fractions, but you could not make an offer if you didn't own anything. However, as long as you own 0.00001%, you were allowed to make an offer. And what we saw was that people that have 0.0001% don't have much at stake. So they were still not deterred from making noble offers, and we still had a decent amount of spam. So that's one of the things that we really took with us to NIFTEX V2 and said, we're going to improve this. And with NIFTEX V2, you now have a minimum threshold, a percentage ownership that you need. So you need to own, for example, 3% of the total supply in order to be able to make a buyout offer. So we can make sure that you have something at stake and you're going to be serious about your buyout offer. Otherwise, you're kind of just wasting everyone's time, because it's unlikely that anyone will ever agree with your lowball offer. But you can continue spamming it if you don't have, if you can just buy like a very small fraction over and over again, right? So that's with NIFTEX V2, you have greater restrictions in terms of the offer you can make. However, what we're also introducing with NIFTEX V2 is local governance, which means that you have kind of like a mini DAO around each NFT or set of NFTs that is fractionalized. And one of the things you can do with the DAO is change, for example, this threshold, this buyout threshold, right? So if you don't like the minimum 3% and you want it to be more, or you want it to be less, you can make a governance proposal and say, I want to change it to 1% or 5%. And then everyone else that owns a fraction of this NFT, like normal governance in a DeFi DAO or something, will accept or reject your proposal. And we're very excited about this. This is slightly less, the governance side of things is slightly less financial and more about just organization and kind of encouraging very small ecosystems to kind of emerge around NFTs and sets of NFTs and encourage people to work together towards a common goal, which again, I don't think was really possible before.
So for example, if I have 3% of a rare XC, Mystic XC, for example, what I need to do to buy out this thing is to make a bid on the remaining 97% that I don't already own. And then if I can still make a lowball offer, but then the remaining 97% of the token holders will have to kind of buy out whatever that I have made an offer. And if I make a stupid low offer, then I lose out on my 3%. Is that sort of the right way to think about it?
Exactly. And you're making life easy for them by offering a low price, because they get to yield that same price against you, right? So they get to buy you out for cheap and get rid of you for a low amount of money. Well, the whole point is that if you would have made a decent offer that actually gets close to the market value of the NFT, they would have to take it into consideration seriously and say, okay, is this offer something, the price at which I would sell my fractions, or do I have the money to buy this person out, right? So when you're trying to buy out someone that made the initial offer, you can also pool your ether. So people, the 97% can pull their ether together to buy you out. It's not like one other person needs to buy you out. There can be a group of people that buy you out.
And it's the default answer is yes or no. So like once I made this offer to buy the remaining 97%, is the onus on the token, the remaining 97%, to kind of reject my offer, or if they don't do anything, it's accepted automatically?
So if they don't like it, then the onus is on them to reject it by buying you out. They have to buy you out in order to get rid of your offer. If everyone approves, and this is where you kind of have like this passive approach, which is nice because you don't have to involve everyone on the blockchain, then no one has to do anything. And then after a period, we see, okay, has there been a counteroffer? If there has been no counteroffer, then you get control of the NFT or the set of NFTs, and they get the ether that you offered initially.
And what's the time frame for that drag along to kind of for the offer to be accepted or rejected by the
So in NIFTEX V1, we decided to do this in a 2-week period. So for 2 weeks, people can consider this offer and see how they like it, what they're going to do. Are they going to organize themselves to buy you out, etc., etc. But in hindsight, or not in hindsight, but we kind of later on, it became clear to us that 2 weeks was kind of long, and that everything in crypto is permanently on steroids and goes very fast. And so in most cases, people will have made up their minds within the first few days. And so for NIFTEX V2, we've reduced this to 5 days only, right? But again, you have that governance kind of mechanism where you can say, I want to increase this period, or I want to even decrease this period even more. So what I'm trying to say is all these things that we're discussing, these like constants of like 2 weeks, 3% minimum, all of this, NIFTEX V2 is such that you can change all of these things for your fractions if you want to, right? So you can lower the buyout threshold, you can increase durations, you can even do this for the governance proposals themselves, the duration of the governance proposal and the minimum required and such. And on top of that, you can also, via governance, make use of the rights of NFTs. So if you have an ENS domain name or a Decentraland parcel, when you own a Decentraland parcel, you have the right to build something on that parcel, right? Or appoint someone that can build on that parcel. Now, the problem is that when you fractionalize such an NFT, it goes into a dumb contract, and the dumb contract doesn't know how to use this NFT. So you kind of lose the rights. And the governance that I mentioned, these mini DAOs, actually allow you to continue making use of these rights, which we think is really something with a quite an amazing amount of potential. Even now already, you can imagine that maybe you have a big Decentraland estate, or in another virtual world, a big amount of parcels on which you're building something that generates money. So you can, first of all, organize yourselves as a group of people that own this land, right? So the financial pressure is distributed across people. And then if this land generates revenue, then you can redistribute it among these people. So you've got these like mini shareholder structures kind of that we think have an insane amount of potential. I mean, these are obviously early days, but if NFTs really start making a digital impact in the general digital world, this is going to be huge by itself, for sure.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, as you were saying, that the thought that came to my head was kind of like rental agreements on digital land, because digital lands are going to be, it's so expensive these days, and people are renting them to build their galleries, for example, on 3 months, 1 year basis. But yeah, and then having a fractional ownership and distributing it across all the fraction would be pretty interesting, I would say.
Yeah.
Do you already have such fractional lands as on NIFTEX?
So actually, like the very first NFTs that we fractionalized were our own NFTs, of course, to test our platform. And so we had a decent amount of Decentraland parcels, so we fractionalized those. But like I said, for NIFTEX V1, we didn't have access to governance. So you lost the rights there. And that's definitely something we wanted to solve for NIFTEX V2. So for NIFTEX V2, we haven't done, I think, any really official NFT governance actions on the mainnet yet. However, for the testnet, we did something pretty cool. I don't know if you're familiar with Async Art, an NFT art project, right? So Async has this like painting that they divide into layers, and each of these layers is an NFT. And then when you own one of these layers, you can set the content yourself, right? So you can change the background of a painting, or the colors or symbols or something, which is really cool. And so what we did on testnet, and they were very generous with providing a layer to us, is I took this layer that allowed me to change the content of the painting, and I fractionalized it. And then, of course, these fractions were distributed across, different wallets, different people owning this layer. And then I made a governance proposal to change something in that layer and that's all on chain. So it's a transaction that I proposed to change something in that layer, and then it passed governance, and that layer was effectively changed. So that's an example. So that's something we don't test on. So that's an example of how people can come together and coordinate on how to, make on-chain state changes, like distributing Ether, changing the content of a layer, changing the builder for a parcel, etc., etc.
Very interesting. So you spoke a lot about NIFTEX V2. You kind of briefly mentioned some of the updates that are coming with V2. Any other changes that are coming that you haven't really mentioned yet with V2? It's live on Ethereum mainnet now as well, right?
Yes, so it's live at niftex.org. We also have a testnet version we can buy at alpha.niftex.org. So the alpha has been live for, I think, more than a month already. It's had a lot of people that came in to test. And yeah, in terms of what is different, everything is different. So we've basically just thrown a massive upgrade at everything we did on V1, and we kind of started over also with everything from smart contracts to UI, right? So again, for a proof of concept, you're not going to invest that much in UI, UX, and that kind of thing. But at the same time, if you aim to be like a self-service platform for fractionalization, UI, UX is very important. So that's something that we paid special attention to for the second version of the website, which was completely reworked. It's completely different. It does a much better job at presenting information, at organizing information, at assisting people with creating fractions. So we figured that one of the most important things for us to do in order to continue pushing fractionalization forward is education, right? And so we've made special room on the homepage with like an introductory video. We want to add case studies for kind of like famous things that were done with NIFTEX V1. For example, Coin Artist from Neon District, she fractionalized herself. And and she uses Coin as like a community membership, proof of community membership, and she has a really active, vibrant community. They've done really cool DeFi experiments with fractions. Then Cloudwhite from the Axie Infinity community has done a lot with fractions as well, for Coke and Cream. And those are things that we think are just very inspiring, and we should document them properly to also, educate people about what fractional ownership is, what you can do with it, the fact that anyone can do this, the fact that gas fees are also a lot lower on NIFTEX V2 than on NIFTEX V1, etc., etc., etc. Everything bigger, better, whatever you want to imagine. And we have lots of plans, like coming plans as well, because NIFTEX V2 is really built as a protocol. And so that means that you can easily add more add-ons, new features to the protocol, or remove, features that maybe are deprecated that you want to replace with other things. It's really hyper modular, and it's really meant to become the backbone of fractionalization.
I understand that in NIFTEX V1, you guys use Uniswap as the matching engine, but you've kind of gone one up and run your own AMM in NIFTEX V2, if I understand correctly. Yep. So trying to understand, like, why do you guys make this change, and what sort of flexibility? I suppose that you guys have a lot more flexibility when you guys run your own AMM. I'm just trying to hear what are the benefits running your own AMM versus just putting it on Uniswap.
Yeah, so Uniswap was fantastic for us to bootstrap because we didn't have to invest time into coming up with a matching engine if we wanted to do something centralized or an AMM design. So it was extremely convenient. However, over time, it became clear that there are some downsides to Uniswap type platforms that are specifically related to fractions, because in the end, a fraction is not your average ERC20. A fraction has additional powers and also is backed by an underlying NFT, right? There's an underlying NFT. It's not just a vanilla fungible token. And so you would have these awkward things where, for example, let's say we fractionalize an NFT, and then there has been a buyout, a successful buyout, which means that the NFT has been recovered by someone, and everyone else that had fractions received Ether, right? But those fractions are not automatically burned because it would be too technically intensive. So you're still sitting on those fractions, and that Uniswap pool that contains the fractions continues trading, but the NFT has been recovered. So there's nothing underlies these fractions anymore. They're basically worthless. However, we can't shut down the Uniswap pool because the whole point is that they're permissions, right? So there's kind of an awkward divergence there between normal fungible tokens that will never really be shut down and fractions that are naturally shut down as something happens to the underlying asset. So we said, okay, this is kind of just a deal breaker. And there were other things we wanted to improve as well, like, for example, artist royalties. So what we did is we came up with our own bonding curve design, which really optimizes for fractions. So for example, there's also less slippage when you trade, because naturally the supplies of these fractions are much lower than you would have for your average DeFi fungible token or something. So there were some technical adjustments or some mathematical adjustments that we made as well. And now, for example, the curve properly shuts down after there has been a buyout. It charges the same LP fees that you would normally get on other AMMs, but it also has, for example, artist royalties, which is very interesting. So artist royalties, whenever I trade an NFT, right, no fractions. So I'm just buying, selling an NFT. If an artist made that NFT, they will get royalties, right? Again, the problem is with fractionalization is that the NFT is not moving. The NFT is just in a custody contract, right? So there are no royalties being charged, even though people are trading the fractions of the NFT. So that artist should still have exposure to people trading those fractions, right? So in the first version of NIFTEX, what we did is we would give artists a part of the supply, of the fraction supply, as kind of like a one-time royalty. But artists are not traders. And so, artists would be sitting in all these fractions and they wouldn't really know what to do with them. And it was a pain in the ass to manage and whatever. So we figured that a better replacement for this would simply be to allow them to earn trade fees, like the LPs earn trade fees, right? So now artists will have that kind of like scalable benefit of having active fraction markets because they earn every time a fraction is traded. And we think that, again, this doesn't really exist at all at the moment. And at the same time, we think fractions unlock an entirely new scale of volume, which could have a great financial impact on artists as well, as they benefit from much higher volume than if their NFTs would have remained in one piece. A famous example that we always give is Almace from Axie Infinity. So if Almace would have remained in one piece, we always say it might have traded a few times in the year and it might have done a few hundred Ether in volume. But then when we fractionalized Almace, it did like 1,000 Ether volume in the first 1 or 2 weeks, right? So you're looking at an entirely different scale of things. And we're now allowing artists to also benefit from that huge potential scaling up.
And like trying to understand the fees involved here. So with Uniswap, there is a 0.3% AMM swap fee, right? And now with your AMM, from what I'm hearing, is the same as the Uniswap one. So I suppose 0.3% goes to the LPs, and how many percent goes, and then how much add-on would it go to NIFTEX, and then how many percent would it go to the artists?
Right. So we don't really know what's going to work in terms of artist fees and NIFTEX fees yet, right? So the NIFTEX fee, by the way, is 0 at the moment. There will be a DAO at some point, and that DAO will then decide to enable that fee if they want to, and how much that fee should be. For the artist royalties, we're assuming it's like 0.1% at the moment, but we don't know, we don't know the attitude of LPs to this yet. We don't know the attitude of artists to this yet. We've had people say, oh, I want to use governance to increase the artist fee to like 1% or 10%, but imagine paying 10% on every fungible trade. It's kind of insane, if you compare it to a normal exchange where we're talking about 0.something% usually. So again, it's very experimental. We do think this is the right direction. And we hope that over time, we can find a balance between the interests of the users, of the LPs, of the artists, and just bring the ecosystem generally together across these markets.
Share with us some interesting stats on NIFTEX. So how many NFTs have been fractionalized so far? What's the highest and lowest valuation on NFTs on NIFTEX, for example?
So lowest valuation, you can go as low as you want to, because people have fractionalized lots of NFTs that are completely unheard of and that maybe only they had interest in. So low is low. And then in terms of high, I think either Almace or Halt has reached or has already reached 1,000 Ether valuation in their markets, which I think is somewhat trustworthy because those markets tend to be liquid. But then you also have more exotic things like CloudWhite's Coke, which has a very, very strong story behind it because he's been campaigning for it for so long, and there's been lots of material written about it, lots of people making art with his Axie involved. And that also has reached absolutely crazy valuations. but that was on pretty low volume. And that's still a Uniswap market. So you've got the huge slippage, right? So that valuation is going to move around a lot, and it's not going to be particularly accurate. And obviously our expectations is that these valuations will continue to increase as more people discover, the benefits of fractions, being able to own something of a super exclusive asset, being able to benefit as an LP from activity in the market, and just an emotional bond. People do develop emotional bonds between especially symbolic assets or iconic assets. And this just is, right in the direction of what they would want to. In terms of how many fractionalizations we've done, I think we've done hundreds, if not I don't know if we've done 1,000. I would need to verify if we've come that far yet. But what I think is the coolest thing is that we've basically fractionalized any type of NFT under the sun, from art, which is very straightforward, to game assets, which already have a richer context, and to utility NFTs that we think are a third category that is kind of a dark horse at the moment and a little unexplored, but that in the long term could actually eclipse both art NFTs and game NFTs, because utility NFTs are NFTs with powers, like, ENS, Decentraland parcels. But also, for example, when Andre Cronje, I think that's how I pronounce his last name, I'm not sure, from Yearn, was working on his insurance policies were NFTs. With Uniswap V2, LP positions are also NFTs, right? And so here you suddenly see this kind of third area emerging where NFTs are not used to, represent anything visual or even gamified to an end user, but are more used as a unique component in a wider system. We think that in the longer term, this could be absolutely massive. And again, fractionalization for those types of NFTs also makes a lot of sense, because, for example, you could have multiple people owning a policy. If that policy generates money, people could, same concept goes for Uniswap V2 positions. Yep. And yeah, you can just continue. That pattern just repeats and repeats and repeats.
Yeah, for me, I completely agree with you. I look forward to the future because NFTs can represent anything. And technically NFTs, they're quite good to represent intellectual property, in my opinion. And IPs may have cash flow from it. So if you are an IP creator, instead of you waiting to get your cash flow stream over to you in the next, 20 years of the shelf life of that IP, fractionalizing it is actually quite a good idea, because you get to get the cash up front at the start, and then the purchaser gets to go through the stream of income over the period of time. So NFTs that generate income is actually very interesting to me. And yeah,
it's a fantastic addition to just the general concept of programmable finance, right? This is just such a great application, and I would actually argue a core component of programmable finance. And it's going to be absolutely massive in the future. And the cool thing is you can also slap DAOs on top, right? So when we talk about creating IP, it can be one person, but it can also be something like Pleaser DAO, where multiple artists congregate, right, with an idea or a concept and create whether it's art or more involved unique assets that then immediately have different interests baked in, and so they can fractionalize it, or they can just engage in other more advanced DeFi applications. It's a bit of a cliche, but it is a Cambrian explosion, as they like to call it. It's just a huge bomb going in all directions, and there's going to be a lot of dust, and it's a bull market, so things tend to get a little detached from the basics, from the fundamentals. But the cool thing is that once that dust settles, we will have a layer that has never existed before, where artists are empowered, smaller budgets are empowered, and just I think people in general should be empowered by if we do a good job.
Some of the NFTs on NIFTEX, they're all individual NFTs, and you have people like NFTX, which goes around creating NFT index, like NFTX hashmask index is, for example, it's a sort of fractional NFT which has a collection of hashmasks in there. Can NIFTEX support a collection of NFTs as well, or is it kind of mainly targeted to individual NFTs?
Yeah, so we have in fact done bundles since the beginning. So even on NIFTEX V1, there are multiple bundles. I think the most famous ones are the ones from Grow Your Base. So Grow Your Base were the first to create an art bundle that I think contains 19 artworks called the Nifty ones with a Z at the end. And the Nifty ones have been live for at least, I think, half a year by now. The first real instance for us of a bundle. After that, they also created the Metaverse ones, which is a bundle of different Metaverse assets that contain like Sandbox Land, I think Somnium Land, Crypto Voxels is in there. I don't know if Decentraland is in there. So this stuff has existed for a long time. It's just that we've made it a lot more efficient with NIFTEX V2. So for example, with NIFTEX V2, you have active management of that bundle. You can continue adding assets after the bundle has been created. So that bundle can represent an ever-growing, themed group of assets, whether it's art or some other thing that you're interested in. And via governance, you can also cooperate with everyone else that owns fractions in that bundle and say, hey, I want to sell this particular NFT. And then the proceeds from that sale, that Ether, can be redistributed across everyone that owns a part of this bundle, right? And so you've got kind of like people actively managing these groups of assets, which we think has a lot of potential in itself. It really becomes, a platform to kind of create your own little shared portfolio at that point. And we already have like one bundle called R64X, which was created on NIFTEX V2, which used to be like a gallery, like a real world gallery that they then transformed into an NFT gallery, fractionalized, so everyone can own a piece of this gallery. All the artists in that gallery are earning these trade royalties as the fractions trade. And that bundle started with like 51 NFTs, and I think we're up to 80 NFTs now. So the creator keeps sourcing new NFTs and adding them and expanding the gallery, which is just super cool dynamic in itself. I think it's valued at more than $500,000 at the moment. So I think he's got something really interesting going there. We just put an interview with this person online. He's called Musho. He's from the West Coast, I think.
What's this NFT called again? R62, is it?
R64X. So if you just search for R64X on niftex.org or even I think elsewhere, you'll find the details page, which shows all the NFTs in that bundle. Like there's like a horizontal scroll. The volume, that the current price, I think the valuation is pretty good at the moment. And yeah, this to us has also just been very inspiring. We didn't like specifically target galleries or anything, but this person saw the potential and said, hey, I'm going to turn this collection into something that anyone can own and that all the artists can also benefit from as their artworks are traded in this kind of whole in this unit, instead of like as individual artworks lost in the wilderness of Rarible or OpenSea or whatever else.
And how does it work? Like once you have, like, say you start a fractional NFT, you take 20 artworks, you put together, you fractionalize them, and then you add another artwork to it. Do you guys just issue new tokens and give that new tokens because you added a new NFT into this shard, I suppose?
So basically minting, when you add an NFT, that's an economic decision, right? That's a decision to kind of dilute the existing fraction holders because new assets have been added. And so that's not really something that's up to NIFTEX to decide. That's something up to the owners of the bundle to decide. So what we are expecting to happen is for governance to take place and someone saying, okay, I added a bunch of new NFTs to this bundle. Now I want to mint more tokens to represent this bundle. And they would, like in any other DAO, kind of actually make a proposal to mint more tokens, and everyone else that owns a piece should approve this, right? Or should say, I'm okay with being diluted if I get some of these tokens. Or so that's a really cool application of these mini DAOs right there. We are not making the decision for them. This is a decision that should be made through governance, through consensus of everyone that owns a piece of the bundle, and that's exactly how we've kind of enabled the platform to work.
And this governance, are they on-chain governance or sort of like snapshot off-chain, no guess kind of governance?
So you need to get the core right. So if you can't enforce anything on-chain, then it's not real governance, right? It's all about those zeros and ones in the end. So this is purely on-chain, and then since again it's very early and we don't know what's going to work, what's not going to work, etc. We're waiting to add off-chain solutions, like for example snapshots, to see to get an idea. I mean, you also need to reach a certain scale, right? You need to reach a certain amount of people that are interested, that are fraction holders, in order to really need these advanced professional governance solutions.
Yeah,
like
you're right.
off-chain
I mean, we
snapshots and stuff like that.
kind of get
But
too far ahead of ourselves. Like, I mean, this is what the future can be, but people are ready for it today, right? That's another education is important.
I don't think you're getting ahead of yourself. I think that's the natural progression, right? We are going in the same. Okay, so Compound, before the DeFi hype, Compound was a quiet platform, right? There was some stuff happening, but it was nowhere as big as it is now. So all of a sudden, just a number of steroids came in, and its basic model was proven over and over again at larger and larger scales. That same pattern should take place for these media DAOs around these NFTs. If these NFTs have intrinsic value, if they have intrinsic value, and if you've properly executed on having distributed control, then it will go in the same direction. I'm not saying that any set of NFTs is going to be as big as Compound, but I'm saying it will scale up in the same way. Do
you think so? This question on like buying and selling NFTs, I think it's pretty clear that it's not a security, but fractionalizing an NFT and turning them into a fungible token, like I don't know. Do you think that's kind of a gray area with regards to securities laws and all? Or I just want to hear your thoughts about such things.
So I think it's very early days, right? So I'm not a lawyer. I don't give legal advice. But these things are just, I think this is part and parcel of what everyone kind of does in blockchain all the time. You're just continuously innovating. And there is always a financial aspect that may or may not clash with what is in the real world, right? So what we're kind of waiting for is just regulators to catch up and understand what NFTs are and see what their opinion is, right? Again, I don't give advice and I'm not legally trained, but to me, a fraction, if a painting is not a security, then I don't directly see why a fraction of that painting should be a security. Because in the end, it's just a painting, it's just a thing on the wall, right? So there's a lot to be figured out, and I can't really comment on anything specific there.
So I've got a question here, right? Which do you think will hold value better over time? A rare NFT, a common NFT, a wrapped NFT index like the NFTX by Hashmas or CryptoPunks, or a sharded rare NFT on NIFTEX?
I mean, in the end, if the base unit, right, which is the NFT, if that doesn't hold its value, then nothing else will. And then the card house just comes crashing down, right? So you do need people to continue appreciating the NFT standard, what an NFT represents, which to me means a scarce digital asset. And then if that holds true, if people continue valuing it, then the rest of the valuation and where exactly it's going to go, whether it's NFTX or a NIFTEX asset or something else, is execution, right? So actually, with regards to NFTX, I consider them more complements than substitutes, because we take different approaches to the composition of these bundles of NFTs, right? With NFTX, I think the focus is on NFTs that are similar to each other, so you can have the uniform price that can be applied to each of them. While with us, we don't assume that NFTs are the same, and so you get more, heterogeneous combinations, which kind of makes price dynamics harder to simplify. But at the same time, I think it's maybe sometimes a little more accurate in terms of actual value stored. And so just generally, I think it all comes down to execution and the execution depends on what people really want, right? And what just kind of works best for them. Part of that is also, by the way, something that is not really financial, which is the simple presentation of NFTs. What do you own when you own a fraction of an NFT? How can you display this? It requires integration with wallets to show it off to your friends. It requires big platforms to recognize it, like OpenSea. We did some early work where we made fractions show up on OpenSea, and we've had recent requests to kind of start doing that again. A lot of it is also just social, standards, or just how it has been agreed to be shared with other people. How people normally do this. I don't think it's all that different with NFTs. And so a lot of it may actually not be purely financial, but there may also be important social aspects.
we're starting to see a lot of layer one chains grow in popularity this year. So BSC, Binance Smart Chain, is a very obvious example of them gaining traction this year. Do you think NFTs will also take off on other layer one chains like BSC, Polkadot, Avalanche, or other layer one chains? Or do you think most NFTs will most likely sit on Ethereum for the medium long term?
So I'm not a maximalist, right? So I encourage everyone to experiment and start their own chain if they have to or whatever. If they raise an insane amount of money for that chain, I will be a little skeptical. But I mean, everyone just experiments the way they want to, right? That's kind of the whole point, especially for people that are interested in doing the type of things you can do in Ethereum. So if BSC also makes that easy, then sure, go ahead, use it on BSC. And from that perspective, I don't think we should say things like, oh, it cannot happen outside of Ethereum. There's no good reason to say such a thing. I mean, right? There are other chains that can do a decent job of hosting NFTs. And so I don't think it will be exclusive to Ethereum, and we don't even know if Ethereum will exist in 20 years. I mean, we can't anticipate what's going to happen, right? So if by that time everything has been replaced by another chain, then naturally Ethereum wasn't the only issue. What I will say, though, is that Ethereum by now is light years ahead of anyone else, right? Not just in terms of standards, know-how, experimentation, etc., but also culture and history. We have an extremely rich NFT history, right? CryptoPunks, and then we started discovering all these things that existed even before CryptoPunks and Mooncats and God knows what else. And I think there was like an OG NFT meeting yesterday, or like a clubhouse or something, where they were discussing things that were even before Mooncats and maybe at the time of Bitcoin. And by the way, I should mention Rare Pepe's Bitcoin, right? There was a counterparty Bitcoin before Ethereum.
Yeah, but a lot of people forgot that the Peeps are the first NFTs and they're on Bitcoin chain. I used to play with Counterparty and the Peeps were there. It's like the frog was a cute thing, and everybody thought like CryptoKitties were the first NFT. They're not. I mean, they were probably one of the first on Ethereum, but not the first on the blockchain.
Yeah, and that's OG as hell. And people love OG stuff in crypto, but somehow they're still very under the radar. I'm not sure why, but the point remains that Ethereum has this insane history, and so I think for normal people will continue to be the default chain of inspiration at the very least, right? So there maybe for a certain amount of people there's a jump they have to make when they decide where to mint their NFT, knowing that the OG NFTs almost all came from Ethereum. Why would you not want to be on the same chain? Because it kind of assures you that your target group, NFT buyers, are going to be on Ethereum, right? So if you choose another chain, you have to, I mean, not everyone cares, or not everyone is aware, but some people will be aware and will have to make a conscious business decision to go to a chain where it is not guaranteed that they have a target market as big as on Ethereum.
Yeah. So what's kind of I guess I'd like to ask this question. If someone's a beginner listening to this podcast, a beginner in NFT, what sort of advice and this beginner would like to start collecting NFTs, what sort of advice would you give to this beginner on starting his NFT collection journey?
I mean, I could be shilling my fractions and stuff, but I don't actually think that I don't think that's actually good advice, because fractions are like, I call it like a micro level. It's a different level under NFTs, right? And so you need to have gone through the NFT hoop in order to kind of get to the fractional part, or you just need to be a very savvy person generally. But I think for beginners, they're going to be super confused with this fractions of NFT stuff. And so they just need to have a very solid foundation in NFTs themselves. So I would advise them to start with art, because art is really, and that's also why art has been so prominent, I think, during this NFT hype. It's really the easiest and most straightforward place to start. It's a Mona Lisa, but it's digital, and it's represented by this token that you can have in your wallet, right? I don't think it gets easier than this, because even your pitch for game NFTs will have to be, you need this NFT in your wallet, and then you have this creature in the game, and then the creature can earn money, and that money goes to, so it's not necessarily harder, but it's more for them to parse, right? So art is a good place to start, and especially maybe if they listen to what the creators have to say, like the creators of CryptoKitties, what their intentions were, the creators of the punks and the glyphs, what their intentions were. If you can get like the basic philosophy right of what they were trying to do, which to me is just creating digital scarcity or enforcing digital scarcity, then you're already like a long way, I think, down the rabbit hole. And then you get to a point where you just have to decide what type of NFT you like. You know, do you like game NFTs? Do you like art NFTs? If you like art NFTs, what kind of artist? And as your portfolio grows, you will likely just become an expert in your own rights in that specific part of NFTs, right?
Sounds like a good advice. I think we're running out of time. Anything that you think I should have asked that I haven't already asked, or any last words that you want to say to our audience?
I mean, everyone is of course super welcome on NIFTEX.org. It's very easy to create your own fractions. All you have to do is, have them in your wallet. You connect your wallet and you can get started. So definitely check that out. We will also be launching probably a DAO later on. So I think that's going to be a big story in itself. We've got a bunch of projects cooking that I can't quite disclose yet, but make sure to keep an eye on it. And just generally, we're in a bull market. Don't go with the flow too much. Stay grounded. Don't spend money that you shouldn't be spending. And give it a bit of time and see where things go, because every other week nowadays it's like this new thing that comes along. I think now this week the flavor is BSC projects, and we had the Hashmax hype, and then we had Doge going crazy. So don't go too fast. Take it easy.
Thank you very much. Very good advice. All right. Really appreciate that you take the time to come on the CoinGecko podcast and share your point of view on NFTs and fractionalized NFTs with what you guys do at NIFTEX. So thanks a lot once again.
Cheers, Bobby. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
The CoinGecko podcast is sponsored by eToro. Here's a short blurb about the services that eToro provide.
Meet Chris and Mark. They've both heard of Bitcoin and Ethereum. But while Chris is using eToro to trade top cryptocurrencies, Mark keeps getting cold feet. Chris uses eToro's simple and intuitive platform to build his own crypto portfolio. And Mark is still waiting for a sign. Chris follows and connects with other experienced traders on eToro. Mark is following the advice of Eugene, a friend who prefers to keep his money where he can see it. Chris uses eToro's copy trader to automatically replicate the portfolios of leading traders in real time, while Mark is still searching for answers. Do you feel like a Mark? Join eToro and gain the confidence you need to trade crypto. eToro. Sign up for free.
This podcast is provided as part of the overall information on cryptocurrency contained on our website, is for your general information only, and does not howsoever constitute any endorsement, financial or investment advice, nor any solicitation or offer of securities or other financial instruments. CoinGecko and the podcast presenter makes no warranties, implied or express, of any kind in relation to this podcast, including, without limitation, the accuracy and updatedness of its content. All opinions and recommendations therein the podcast are based on the personal opinion of the presenter. Please conduct your own research and procure professional advice should you, at your own risk, decide to howsoever invest or trade in relation to the content contained in the podcast.